Hello, this is Tracy reading to you from the New Bedford Light on Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. On the environment, oyster growers say sewage-related closures threaten their business, by Adam Goldstein. 2024 was supposed to be Mattapoisett oyster farmer Mike Ward's biggest year yet. He planned to scale up production on his 4-acre Nantasket Bay farm ahead of selling it and retiring in 2026. But Ward's farm, Mattapoisett Oysters, suffered 180-plus days of state-imposed emergency closures last year after rains caused raw sewage to repeatedly spill from New Bedford's combined sewer system into Buzzards Bay. Now his plans to sell are on hold. I think it's worth zero right now, except for my equipment, Ward said. Ward wasn't the only local oyster farmer whose plans were disrupted by New Bedford's combined sewer overflows last year. West Island Oysters co-owner Dale Levitt was looking to boost production on his 48-acre Nascatucket Bay farm. Now his Fairhaven business is running on fumes, quote, after experiencing 180-plus days of emergency closures. In Dartmouth, Scott Soers was looking to grow his half-acre Padanaram oyster farm in Apponeonset Bay. Roughly half of his farm income was wiped out by 212 days of emergency closures. Since January 2024, emergency shellfish bed closures have presented an urgent threat to oyster aquaculture in Buzzards Bay. We have to make sure public health is paramount, said DMF Deputy Director Bob Glenn. DMF, the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries, has been enacting emergency closures more regularly in local growing areas since 2022, when a state law went into effect that requires combined sewer operators, including the City of New Bedford, to disclose raw sewage spills when they occur. These sewage-related emergency closures have prevented roughly 8 oyster growers in Apponeonset and Nascatucket Bays from consistently harvesting and selling their product. The local oyster aquaculture industry brought in roughly $1 million worth of commercial landings in 2023. On the Mayor's Conference, a busy weekend for Mitchell at Mayor's Conference, by Grace Ferguson. Washington. It's one of the few places where you can turn several heads just by saying, "Hey, Mayor." More than 270 mayors from across the country descended on a Marriott in Washington, D.C. this past weekend for the annual winter meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. They held panels on topics ranging from clean energy to public safety to immigration policy. As mayors dined on sponsored lunches, the organization's leaders set their federal policy priorities for 2025. More than 700 city officials, subject matter experts, and business people registered to mingle with the mayors in color-coded lanyards. On the eve of President Donald Trump's inauguration, then President Joe Biden and 2 officials from his cabinet addressed the conference. Mexico's ambassador to the U.S. answered immigration questions at a panel. New Bedford Mayor John Mitchell is a regular at these meetings. He recently went on 5 trips for the organization in a 1-year period, the Light reported in an analysis of his travels. Mitchell sits on the organization's Board of Trustees. What Mitchell did in Washington. The New Bedford mayor was a leading voice on climate issues at this meeting. At the closing session on Sunday, Mitchell said mayors must lead the climate conversation. At a panel on clean energy tax credits, he spoke briefly about plans to use geothermal energy in the to-be-constructed Congdon DeVal School. The thing about geothermal is it works, he said, because it lasts long and lowers energy costs. In an interview, Mitchell said some of the most interesting things he heard at the conference were about climate. It's been diminished as a political issue because some people are fatigued about hearing it, he said. The mayor said he learned about better ways to message on climate by keeping messages relevant and fact-based and not coming across as a smarty pants about it. Mitchell also spoke up at a panel on hate where experts described a rise in anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, far-right anti-immigrant sentiment, and violence on college campuses. The mayor told other attendees it's important to acknowledge the Jewish community's fears of violence. Mitchell also attended a panel on gun violence. He said the panel topics were important, but the discussions didn't teach him much he didn't already know. As time goes on, there are fewer best practices to internalize. He also said he held private meetings with other leaders at these conferences, which are often more important to him than the formal panels. Mitchell also made the usual round on Capitol Hill with a visit to Senator Ed Markey on Friday. They talked about the planned closure of a federal building in downtown New Bedford, NOAA's future headquarters, offshore wind, fishing, and port infrastructure, Mitchell said. Also on Friday, Mitchell said he had a meeting with America 250 about ways New Bedford can participate in the country's 250th birthday next year. I think people need to know I spend my time here working very hard for New Bedford, Mitchell said. On Chasing the Music, Paradise and Inwood shine in your theater's production of Red by Don Wilkinson. If one decided to create a theatrical production about a famous visual artist, most playwrights wouldn't opt for the New York School color field painter Martha Rothko. After all, the hard-drinking, chain-smoking, frustrated, and cantankerous abstract expressionist, who claims he is not an abstract expressionist, doesn't have the name recognition, cultural cachet, or the oomph factor of Henri Matisse or Vincent van Gogh or Pablo Picasso, or Frida Kahlo, or Andy Warhol. Furthermore, Rothko lacked the movie-good style looks of Willem de Kooning and the palpable Wyoming cowboy mystique of Jackson Pollock, his irascible compatriots. Nonetheless, American playwright John Logan did just that when he wrote Red, a two-handed, one-set play that premiered at the Donmar Warehouse in London in December 2009, starring Alfred Molino as Rothko and Eddie Redmayne as Ken, a fictionalized studio assistant. In March 2010, it moved on to the Golden Theater on Broadway in New York City with the same two leads. Molina won the Drama League's Distinguished Performance Award. Red won 6 Tony Awards. And now, Red is being performed at the Steeple Playhouse without Molina and Redmayne, of course. I can assure you that local actors Eric Paradise and Paul Inwood, portraying Rothko and Ken respectively, are more than up for the task. It is directed by Suzanne Hubra, and Nicole Perullo serves as stage manager. The place all takes place in Rothko's studio, an old gymnasium at 222 Bowery on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, circa 1958 to 1959. Red opens with Rothko dragging on a cigarette and looking at the space that is a painting when Edward's Ken walks in, starting his first day as a studio assistant. Rothko waves him over and asks, "What do you see?" But before Ken can answer, the beratement begins, setting the manically dark tone which will inform much of the production. They banter a bit. One particular exchange ends with Rothko saying there's a tragedy in every brushstroke before bullying his dumbfounded new aide into drinking an early morning glass of... Ken has been hired to do the menial drudge work in the atelier. A young, hungry, and aspiring painter himself, Ken acquiesces. And although he doesn't know it at the moment, Ken is perhaps more importantly there to be Rothko's sounding board and a whipping boy stand-in for all his imagined enemies. Other painters, museum curators, disgruntled viewers, and yes, goddamn son of a bitch art critics. Much of Red revolves around Rothko's need for a studio assistant, as he has been commissioned by the beverage company Joseph E. Seagram & Sons to produce a series of large-scale murals for the recently completed Seagram building on Park Avenue. Designed by architects Mies van der Rohe and Philip Johnson, the paintings were to be installed in the skyscraper's new luxury restaurant, Four Seasons, serving, quote, power lunches before the term. Red, which opened Friday, will be performed at your theater at Steeple Playhouse, 159 William Street, New Bedford, on January 24th and 25th at 7:30 p.m. and on January 25th and 26th at 2 p.m. On offshore wind, Trump order targets offshore wind, but stopping projects in progress won't be easy. By Anastasia E. Lennon. New Bedford. President Donald Trump wasted no time in his first day in office Monday, ordering a halt to all new leases of offshore wind projects in federal waters and a review of all federally leased and permitted wind projects by the Interior Department. It's what industry experts expected at minimum and goes a step further by opening the door for potential termination of existing offshore wind leases or permits. The review could affect several wind projects off the Massachusetts coast at varying levels of completion. The halt and new leases could also delay for up to 4 years a future phase of wind development off the New York and Mid-Atlantic coasts, a prospect the fishing industry welcomes. But experts say undoing projects that have already been approved won't be an easy task, which makes the Biden administration's 11th hour approval of South Coast Wind and lifting of Vineyard Wind suspension order particularly significant for the state and New Bedford. The nominee for Interior Secretary, former Governor Doug Burgum of North Dakota, said during his confirmation hearing last week that he'll take a look at all existing offshore wind projects and that if they make sense and they're already in law, then they will continue. Drew Minkowitz, an attorney specializing in maritime law and commercial fishing, said the Trump administration would have a difficult legal road ahead to challenge granted and permitted projects. The regulatory process is designed so that rules and approvals cannot be tossed for capricious or arbitrary reasons, he explained. They have to show it's not arbitrary, there is a rational basis for it, that there is some statutory provision that authorizes and permits them to overturn the permit. It's a pretty high hurdle. It's not insurmountable, said Minkowitz. The Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act establishes a process for terminating a lease, which affords both the lessee and government a hearing so they can present their side and arguments. It also grants lessees the right to appeal a decision to terminate. The industry source said that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the lead regulator on offshore wind, doesn't have much precedent with the process for renewable energy leases, and it's likely to be a slow process if it were to happen. There is precedent for Trump's action, as well as legal challenges against executive orders. Former President Joe Biden in 2021 issued an order directing the Interior Secretary to halt oil and gas leasing, though it was overturned in federal court a year and a half later. The Trump administration could rely on pending lawsuits against projects that have already been approved and lease sales that have already occurred to undermine the accomplishments of the Biden administration, said Timothy Fox, an analyst at Clearview Energy Partners. BOEM is defending lawsuits challenging its approval of Revolution Wind and South Fork Wind off the coast of Rhode Island, as well as projects in Virginia and Maryland. This order could encourage offshore wind foes to file additional legal challenges. We think this order could significantly stymie market confidence in offshore wind permitting, notwithstanding the continued strong and stable state policies that support offshore wind development. Governor Maura Healey, a strong proponent of offshore wind development, told reporters Tuesday that Massachusetts will continue to support offshore wind. It's really important for jobs. It's really important for our economy. It's important for establishing regional independence when it comes to energy. Wind power, including land-based turbines, provides about 10% of the electricity generated in the U.S., making it the country's largest source of renewable energy. What it means for New Bedford. The offshore wind industry has attracted millions in public and private investment to the port of New Bedford, supplemented income for local fishermen, and created several hundred union jobs. How local those jobs are has been contested. Mayor John Mitchell previously said that port activity along New Bedford's waterfront would likely drop, and construction and maintenance work promised to New Bedford would at minimum be delayed. Vineyard Wind is currently using the port's marine commercial terminal to stage the major turbine components of offshore construction. Several projects, including South Coast Wind, plan to use the port and its terminals for long-term operations work and short-term construction work. Vineyard Wind, through a spokesperson, declined comment on Tuesday. Michael Brown, CEO of South Coast Wind, in a statement to the Light Wednesday, said the company still believes in the ability for offshore wind to create jobs and generate billions of dollars in economic activity. We will continue to assess the scope and implications of the executive orders on our 3 U.S. projects, Brown said. Mitchell, during a scheduled meeting with the New Bedford Ocean Cluster on Tuesday, said he does not think Trump's order will stop the Vineyard Wind project. That project will continue to go forward. I don't think that's going to be undone, he told an audience of representatives from both the fishing and wind industries. The horse is out of the barn on offshore wind regarding jobs and investments. It will continue to be incumbent upon us to say we want offshore wind, we want fishing, we want to make sure the two exist, Mitchell. As for projects that plan to use the port to support operations but haven't yet started construction, Mitchell said their future is an open question and that his administration will continue to advocate for them while protecting fishing. Those opposed to or critical of offshore wind celebrated Trump's order, while the wind industry made its concern clear. Minkowitz, the fisheries lawyer, said there is relief among the fishing industry, including the scallopers he represents. Some leased wind farm areas off the mid-Atlantic, as well as planned leases, overlap with scalloping grounds, the Light previously reported, presenting potential impacts and revenue loss for the industry. The language of the order says there will be no new leases for as long as the order is in place, Minkowitz said. We don't have to be worried about the next shoe to drop from BOEM. He said he assumes several problematic areas in the mid-Atlantic will be on hold for at least the next 4 years. Eric Hansen, who owns 2 scallop permits out of New Bedford, said he's very, very happy to hear that leases without full permitting will be given a close look, particularly those in the New York Bight and mid-Atlantic area that overlap with scallop grounds. Many of the areas in the Massachusetts, Rhode Island wind energy area, which are already leased or greenlit, are not as much of a concern, Hansen said, as they don't overlap with historically strong and abundant scallop fishing grounds. Next up, Coastin', navigating South Coast life. Things to do. Viva Fall River teams up with the Portuguese Kids by Christina Fontes. What do you want to do? If you need an answer to this age-old question for making plans, we've got you covered. In Things to Do, we take a look at, well, things to do, happening every week in the Greater Fall River area and around the South Coast. From weekdays to weekends, there's always plenty going on. This week, we've got a look ahead at the Viva Fall River experience presented by Viva Fall River and the Portuguese Kids, and featuring a wine tasting, dinner, and private comedy show. Plus, we've got concerts, historic homes, class jewelry making, and much more. We've even got Little Theater of the Fall River presenting a classic Arthur Miller play. So when someone asks you what to do, you've got your plans ready to go. Coming soon, the Portuguese Kids and Viva Fall River present the Viva Fall River experience. The Portuguese Kids and Viva Fall River are teaming up for a night of food, wine, and join them for the Viva Fall River experience on Friday, February 7th from 5:30 to 9:30. It starts with a scenic trolley ride through Fall River's landmarks. There will be a wine tasting at Portugalia Marketplace, 489 Bedford Street, followed by a dinner at TA Restaurant, 408 South Main Street. End the night with a private comedy show starring the Portuguese Kids. For more information and to purchase tickets, visit https://tiny-url.com/2db9e9ed. Upcoming concerts at Narrows River for the Fall Arts in Falls River has some concerts coming up at 16 Anawan Street, Fall River. Brandon Niederauer, nicknamed Taz, T-A-Z, for his ferocious guitar playing, will be performing on Friday, January 24th at 8 p.m. Doors open at 7 p.m. Tickets are $35 in advance and $37 the day of the show. Find tickets online at https://tinyurl.com/MWHEMTMX. Grammy-nominated blues artist and one of the founders of Roomful of Blues, Duke Robillard, will be at the Narrows on Saturday, January 25th at 8 p.m. Doors open at 7 p.m. Tickets are $40 in advance and $42 on the day of the show. Find tickets online at https://tinyurl.com/6BJN66YK. Glass jewelry making at New Bedford Art Museum. The New Bedford Art Museum at 608 Pleasant Street will be hosting a glass jewelry making workshop on Saturday, January 25th at 10 a.m. In this workshop, you'll create 2 glass pieces, such as a pendant or a wishing stone. You'll cut and assemble pieces of sheet glass to be fused in a kiln after class. You'll also learn safety techniques and the science behind cold and warm glass. This class is for kids and adults, and no experience is necessary. All materials will be provided. For more information and tickets, visit tinyurl.com/tinyurl.com/524TSTD5. Little Theater of Fall River presents Arthur Miller Classic All My Sons at Firebarn. Little Theater of Fall River will be hosting performances of Arthur Miller's All My Sons at the Firebarn, 340 Prospect Street, Fall River. Performances will be held from January 23rd to 25th, January 30th to 31st, and February 1st at 7:30 p.m., and January 26th and February 2nd at 2 p.m. Penned by renowned playwright Arthur Miller and running on Broadway from January to November of 1947, All My Sons was a 3-act play about family, wealth, guilt, and the secrets of the past. This production is directed by Heather Gaffney Sue. The cast includes Jerry Larkin, Nancy Winocour, Cam Torres, Emily Rizza, Ian Cooper, Jose Cabral, Moira Costigan-Carraher, Zachary Boulay, and Abigail Dubois, and also Rowan Carraher. Space is limited, and recent productions have sold out quickly, so be sure to get your tickets as soon as you can. Find tickets online at https://events/all-my-sons-jan-23rd-3rd-2025. Performances are for all ages, but be aware that this play contains mature themes, including death, loss, betrayal, and the effects of war. For more information about this production and to purchase tickets, visit littletheater.net/allmysons. Sailing Toward My Father at Marion Arts Center. The Marion Arts Center, 80 Pleasant Street, presents Sailing Toward My Father, performed by Stephen Collins on Friday, January 24th at 6:30 p.m. in the Breitmeyer Webb Theater. Sailing Toward My Father, written and directed by Carl A. Rossi, is a one-man play about Herman Melville, focusing on his evolution as a writer and as a human being. Collins first performed Sailing Toward My Father at Arrowhead in Pittsfield, where Melville wrote his iconic masterpiece, Moby Dick. He also works as a tour guide, offering narrated historical tours of Boston. Tickets are $15 for members, $18 for non-members, $10 for students under 18. For more information and to purchase tickets, visit marionartscenter.org/events. Ronnie Arbo and Daisy Mayhem at Stone Church Coffee House in Bristol. The Stone Church Coffee House at the First Congregational Church, 300 High Street, Bristol, welcomes Ronnie Arbo and Daisy Mayhem on Saturday, January 25th. A New England-based folk quartet, they're now in their 20th year. Doors open at 6:45 and the show starts at 7:30 p.m. Seating is limited and reservations are recommended. Light refreshments will be available. The Stone Church Coffee House is handicap accessible. Tickets are $25 per person. Students are half price. Children 5 and under get in for free. For ticket information and to make a reservation, call 401-253-4813. Fall River Arts Academy Open House. Fall River Arts Academy, 347 South Main Street, will be hosting an open house on Saturday, January 25th from noon to 2. There will be pizza, a free tour, and more. For more information, call 508-567-5555. And coming soon, Roch Jones Duff House and Garden Museum, Waterfront Historic Area League team up for Historic House Series. The Roch Jones Duff House and Garden Museum and the Waterfront Historic Area League, or WHALE, have teamed up to present Living the Old House Dream, a series exploring best practices, interesting projects, and resources for maintaining and restoring older homes. It will kick off at the RJD, 396 County Street, New Bedford, on Tuesday, January 28th at 5:30 p.m. with Lee McColgan. McColgan will share the story of his journey restoring the 1702 Loring House. His book about his experiences examines our relationship to history throughout the homes we inhabit. The series will continue on Tuesdays, February 25th and March 25th at 5:30 p.m. February's speaker will be Patricia Miller, Chief Conservator with the Preservation Society of Newport County. In March, Laura Parrish-Lavin will speak about the Whale House restoration. Admission for the January 28th talk is $10 for RJD and Whale members and $13 for the public. Series passes can be purchased for $25 for members and $35 for the public. For more information or to purchase tickets, visit rjdmuseum.org or call 508-997-1401.